Church of Christ in Zimbabwe, and a member of WCC Commission on Churches on International Affairs, CCIA, and moderator of the core group for the development of principles for child-friendly churches. And please also let me introduce Ms. Katerina Timo, our partnership specialist and expert from UNICEF. Please.
By an important gathering as this one to come and make a presentation. For several months, Tom prepared, kept note paper, continuously took notes for this important presentation. On the day, he drove about 100 kilometers to where the presentation was taking place. As the time to make the presentation came, and he was called up on stage, he discovered that he didn't have his note paper. And what he told the gathering was the following. Ladies and gentlemen, for the last 10 months, the Lord and I knew what I wanted to say. But now, only the Lord knows what I want to say. Fortunately for me, the Lord and I still know what I'm supposed to say. It is a wonderful morning led by, preceded, of course, by the Bible study, a great Bible study. And I thought I would share with you in very short detail how we got to present or develop the principles and tools for child-friendly churches. As you might be aware, as the Commission of Churches on International Affairs, we have a mandate from you to be working on the human rights issues and also the issues to do with churches at international affairs. Now, in the Busan Assembly of 2013, there was an ecumenical conversation where there was a lot of encouragement to the WCC to work on at least coming up with child rights. You might be aware that in several places across the world, children are not being found in churches anymore. Have you ever thought where these children are spending their time? My guess is as good as yours, but I would want to imagine that it's a more worse place than in the church. Therefore, when the CCIA was then reconstituted in 2015 after the assembly, my working group, which is the working group on human rights, children's rights, women's rights, and freedom of religion, providentially found itself with a program that required leadership, and that was the development of principles and tools for child-friendly churches. Ladies and gentlemen, your eminences and excellencies, the journey to developing these tools, in as much as it excited me as a young person, was also an inspiring journey and a journey that our working group could not let go. Therefore, our working group, after deciding to provide leadership in this work, decided that work of this magnitude may not be complete if we don't invite or if we don't ask some of our partners to be accompanying us in this process. We therefore invited several partners and had a seminar on the 19th and 20th of November last year, where some of you in this gathering were part of. In this seminar, two important recommendations came out. The first clear recommendation was, as the World Council of Churches, we needed a firm theological foundation on which to ground these principles and tools. And in the letter accompanying this document, you will see these theological reflections. And Katarina will talk a bit more about them. The second recommendation was that, young as I feel at 35 last week, I'm not a child anymore, and we needed the voices of children. Again, a small explanation of the process in terms of engaging children will be shared with you. After that, we then decided to expand our working group. We now called it a core group, and also even had a bigger group called an advisory group to provide sufficient guidance, expertise, and the knowledge and the skill set required to develop these principles and tools. May I now ask Katarina to take you from the seminar to Trondheim. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure for me to be representing UNICEF here today, especially after such a respectable colleague as Masimba. Please allow me to begin by sharing a personal reflection, a personal example of church reflection about some of the issues we are dealing with today. We are in New York in the Episcopal Church of Epiphany with the Reverend Jennifer. One of the readings that Sunday morning was the story of Elijah and the widow of Zarephath. Now, I don't remember exactly everything that Reverend Jennifer said in her sermon, and it would be out of place for me anyway to repeat her sermon here today. But for sure, it was something that had to do with poverty. Think about the widow who has only one last meal for herself and her son. It was something related to the environment. Think about how many countries in this very moment are suffering a famine because of desertification. And it was something related to inequality. Think about the fact that she's a woman, she's a widow, she's alone, with a son to provide for, in a society that surely was not very easy for a person in such a status. Reverend Jennifer could have chosen to focus her sermon on so many other aspects that, as far as I know, are generally, are more commonly linked to such a passage of the Bible. But instead, she chose to speak about justice and peace. And her sermon made me think about the important role that churches can play in bringing about justice in their communities. And I'm quoting the letter that accompanies the principles. As followers of Jesus, we understand that caring for children in need is an integral part of seeking justice. So, back to the principles now. As Masimba mentioned, the two strong recommendations that came out of the seminar in November were to ground the principles in a strong theological background and to listen to the opinion of, to consider the opinion of children about the draft principles. So in order to address the first recommendation, a theological working group was formed in January 2016 with the task of drafting theological justification for why, as discussed during the Busan Assembly, children should be at the center of WCC's pilgrimage of justice and peace. The group was composed by 10 esteemed theologians from different denominations, Lutheran, Orthodox, Anglican, and Reformed, and from several different parts of the world: Germany, India, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Sweden, the US, and the UK. So the group started collaborating remotely, and then in April, they met for 2 days in Geneva. And their work resulted in the letter that currently accompanies the principles, which was endorsed by WCC General Secretary Reverend Olav. In the letter, member churches are encouraged to take 3 actions: to celebrate the gift of children and celebrate everything positive that churches can do for children and have done for children, to visit the wounds that too often adults inflict on children, for example, by being violent with them. And most importantly, member churches were invited to transform the injustices by taking action for children. The work of these theologians was deeply appreciated. Like a wise man who built his house on a rock, the Principles document lays on a very solid theological background. So the second recommendation to consult with children was also taken very seriously. Between March and May 2016, 144 children between 3 and 18 years old of age were consulted in 7 countries: Albania, the UK, India, Indonesia, Nigeria, South Africa, and Sweden. The children's contribution was truly valued, and their suggestions and comments were fully integrated in the current version of the Principles. And some of their recommendations were so simple, but yet so essential, so key to the heart of what this is all about, that one really can't help wondering how could a group of 90 people, adults, experts, and I'm including myself on children's rights, how could they not think about this before? But that's how it went. So the children who participated in the consultations agreed on the fact that churches can do more for children in terms of affirming their dignity, in terms of providing them with a safe space, and in terms of educating them on their rights. Let me highlight some of the quotes from these consultations that really particularly struck me. Church is a place where you're taught to stop lying, stop beating your younger ones, and change your behavior. This is a child from Nigeria. Or church brings hope and understanding. It creates bridges between countries. A child from Albania. The one of the Principles for Child-Friendly Churches has indeed been a long journey, one that WCC and UNICEF shared at every single step, and one that is far from being over. It is actually just about to begin, really. And UNICEF stands ready to continue this journey together and to support you in any way we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Katerina and Masimba, for these details and important information. We appreciate your effort, your involvement, and your expertise. And now I would like to invite Sabine to talk about protection challenges faced by children in the world today. So please let me introduce and welcome Sabine Rakotomalala, who comes to represent the director of the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children Protection.
Thank you, Martina. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to thank you for being here. It's such an incredible honor and beautiful to see this room full of people. It seems like the UN, all nationalities, men, women, all ages. So a huge thank you for inviting outside speakers. So my name is Sabine Rakotomalala, and maybe I'll just start with 2 minutes of introduction to explain why I'm here. I work for the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children. The Partnership Secretariat is based in UNICEF in New York. I sit within the World Health Organization in Geneva, but I'm actually paid by the Swiss government because the Swiss government finds this important. Even worse, I'm Dutch, but I'm paid by the Swiss government. It's a true partnership. We have all agencies on board: United Nations High Commissionary for Refugees, World Vision, Save the Children, and we have at least 15 member states on the board of the Global Partnership. So it's a true, proper partnership. More importantly, I'm a Christian as well. My mother's Catholic, my father's Protestant. We used to go one Sunday to Catholic church, one Sunday to Protestant church. For 18 years of my life, all 4 children were brought to one and the other. Again, a true partnership. My parents never squabbled about it. It was ecumenical. We knew that's the way it was, and it was fine. We even brought friends from one to the other. So it was proper partnership. So why am I here today? Because I truly believe in partnership, and I think the only way we can move anything forward is through partnerships. I've been working for 15 years in the prevention of violence, abuse, exploitation, and neglect of children In 15 years, things move a little bit here, a little bit there. You see a good program in Congo or a good program in Indonesia or something good happening in Switzerland. But today, I think we're 2016, the Sustainable Development Goals have announced, and I feel that we're at a real turning point. And I think what the World Council of Churches is doing now, even addressing this in your assembly, is really going to help tip the balance. We really need to make a change in terms of violence against children today. And the only way to do this again is through partnership. So what are we talking about when we speak of violence against children? I'm not going to repeat all the statistics, but maybe just a few that Katrina didn't mention. So approximately 1 billion children worldwide have experienced physical, sexual, or psychological violence in the past year. Does anybody know how many children are in the world? 2 billion. So that's 1 out of 2 children have been victim of some form of physical abuse, or physical, sexual, or psychological abuse. That's massive. 1 out of 2 children. 1 out of 4 children suffer from physical abuse. Physical abuse means hitting, spanking, kicking, torturing, so it's serious physical abuse. 1 out of 5 children, 1 out of 5 girls has been sexually abused at least once in her life. 1 out of 5 children. That means that pretty much all of us know at least 2 or 3 children, girls that have been victim of sexual abuse. Every day this happens in every single country, rich and poor. Millions of children are victims of violence in their homes, in their schools, in their communities. So it's really pervasive in our lives. I don't like to dwell on problems. So from now on, the next 7 minutes are going to focus on the solutions. I think like smoking, like cancer, like tuberculosis, we used to all think that's just the way it is. We can't get rid of it, we can't change it, road accidents. But look at the progress those other sectors have made. And today we can do the same about violence. I sit in the World Health Organization with many experts, and they agree that there are solutions. They have actually, on the 11th of July, they'll be launching a package of interventions. It's called Inspire, which I think is a very nice name. And they propose 7 solutions. I have these forms that I'll be showing there at the back of the room. But the 7 solutions are implementation of laws and implementation and enforcement of laws, promoting norms and values, creating safe environments, parents and caregiver support, income and economic strengthening, response and support services, and education and life skills. So the experts have really spent time looking at the evidence from across the world, from rich countries to poor countries, and said these are the 7 interventions that will work. And if you manage to implement these 7 interventions in your country, you'll actually see a reduction of violence within 5 years. So what is the global partnership? As you probably know, in November, the Sustainable Development Goals were announced, and one of the targets, 16.2, is a world where every child grows up free from violence and exploitation. 192 member states have signed on to this. So that's all of us. So that's every single one of us in all the countries where we work have to work towards a Sustainable Development Goal. So the Global Partnership to End Violence was created 8 months ago, just before the launch of the Sustainable Development Goals, with the idea to bring together governments, UN agencies, civil society, including faith-based organizations and churches, foundations, academics, and of course children themselves, to make a change. We're going to be working on 3 things over the next 15 years. And again, this is another one-page infographic that's at the back of the room. The first one is to build political will. We're every day in discussions with Peru, with Mexico, with Tanzania, with Indonesia, to see how we can start creating the political will to diminish violence against children, or to reduce violence against children. The second one is to accelerate action. So it's great, some countries are doing little bits and bobs. What we need now is coherent plans of actions with all the actors I mentioned, government, UN, civil society, churches, where they can look at the Inspire strategy and say, okay, this is how we're going to work for the next 3 to 6 years to see reductions in violence. We need to start accelerating action. The clock is ticking. We have 15 years and we need to get it across 196 countries. So we really need to work in all these countries to reduce all types of violence against children. And then the last one is to strengthen collaboration. We want countries, we want agencies to learn from each other. So we'll be organizing solution summits every 2 years where governments can present to each other what they're doing, which interventions work better than others, and learn from each other as we would as true partners. I think that the mantra of the partnership is really that collaboration and partnership will allow us to do together what no single government or agency can do alone. generally in country, you can see a top-down approach, government saying, this is what we have to do and this is how it has to happen. I think we feel that from the partnership level, it has to be both. So civil society, grassroots movements have to push governments to adhere to their responsibilities, and at the same time, governments have to pick this up and run with it. So I want to just quickly talk about the role of churches, in my view. I think if I were to have a magic wand, and I'm starting to think that the magic wand may just be the World Council of Churches, then I would probably push for three things based on the principles that Katarina was sharing earlier. The first one is to ensure that child safeguarding policies and codes of conduct are really present in every church in the world. I think that's a huge effort and a huge movement, not easy one, that churches can put in place. The second one is to ask churches and communities to work on the N of inspire. So that's the norms and values. I think if churches can help us strengthen the norms and values that support nonviolent, respective, and gender equitable relationships for all children and adolescents, that's probably one of the things that I would say almost only the churches can do. And we have INGOs, we have UN, we have government, but working on norms and values is very complex. And that's something, having gone to the church my whole life myself, I see that that's where I got my norms and values from, and I assume many children and adolescents get theirs from. And then the last one, in emergency context. I've been working for 10 years in emergency context and supporting interfaith dialogue. I think that's a third thing that churches can really work on. I was recently in Central African Republic, where you see great initiatives where the easy way is to say, oh, it's a battle against between the Muslims and the Catholics. When you dig a little bit deeper, it's not at all between the Muslims and the Catholics, and these interfaith dialogues make a huge difference. So those are my three things with a magic wand. Let's see if they work. So before ending, I just want to show you a short film. It's maybe a little bit childish, the film, so I'm sorry if you find it childish. I personally find it very uplifting, and I want you to, it's a resource really, the place where you can find a lot of interesting infographics, information on ending violence against children.
Remember being a kid? Dirt, dolls, temper tantrums, laughter, hugs, even bumps and bruises. A lot of emotions, right? But then we grew up and many of us became parents or active in the life of a child. One thing we all want is for children to grow up to be happy, healthy, and successful. But violence, whether felt or seen, can get in the way of that. It happens in communities, schools, homes, in rich families and poor, in every country in the world. Violence can be physical, emotional, or sexual, and victims often become copycats, creating a terrible cycle for themselves and society. You probably already know that violence impacts kids' health, stunts brain development, makes school harder, costs governments and societies money. The good news is that violence is preventable, and progress can be made quickly. Here are 4 examples. A parent support program in Istanbul reduced the use of harsh physical punishment by 73% in a 4-year period. Cure Violence trains interrupters to stop street violence. They have reduced shootings by 56% in less than 2 years, making Baltimore neighborhoods safer for kids. The Image Project reduced violence in rural South African families by 55% in less than 2 years by organizing women's savings groups to take action together. Prohibiting sales of alcohol after 11 p.m. reduced community violence in Diadema, Brazil by 44% in the 3 years after the policy began. We've learned a lot about what works to prevent violence. It's not an inevitable part of life. It's a behavior we can change. Make your commitment to reducing violence in the lives of children today. Tweet and share this video with #ThisIsForKids. For more information, visit withoutviolence.org.
Thank you all very much, and again, thank you for this wonderful opportunity to speak in front of you, and I wish you a very constructive next 2 days of your meeting.
Sabine, thank you for helping us to see the wider context of challenges faced by children today. So, this really calls for action by churches. As mentioned by Katarina and Masimba, the principles were therefore developed to support our work as churches to respond this. Key people developing these principles are children themselves. We now will show you a video from one of the 7 consultations that took place with 144 children in the world about the role of children and their experience. This experience is from Church of South India.
Following the guidelines provided by the WCC and UNICEF on principles for child-friendly churches, a workshop is being held by the Church of South India in CSI Christ Church, Kanchipuram in Tamil Nadu. Rural children belonging to 11 to 18 years of age, both boys and girls, have come together for this workshop. Through group activity, children were made to understand the difference between rights and needs. Eliciting their perception about the church, children were made to understand what church can do for their well-being and for their protection. During the interactions, children have expressed that they were not taken into account when it comes to taking decisions in the church, even pertaining to their life and their activities in the church.
Children Sunday, children rally, Sunday class நடக்கிற எல்லா ஃபங்க்ஷனும் அதுக்கப்புறம் சில்ட்ரன்ஸ்க்காக நடக்கிற எல்லா ஃபங்க்ஷன்ஸ்லையும் பார்ட்டிசிபேட் பண்ணேன்.
ஃபஸ்ட்டு சண்டே மட்டும் இது கம்யூன் அப்போ இங்கே வருவோம். கம்யூன் அப்போ நாங்கள் கேக் வாங்கிட்டு போயிடுவோம். மற்ற சண்டேஸ்லாம் நாங்கள் சண்டே கிளாஸில் தான் இருப்போம்.
அவங்க நினைக்கிறாங்க எங்களுக்கு நாங்கள் சின்ன பசங்க, அதனால எங்களுக்கு எதுவும் தெரியாது, நாங்கள் சொன்னால் கூட சில நேரம் தப்பாக இருக்கும் அப்படின்னு அவங்க நினைக்கிறாங்க. அவங்க என்ன சொல்ல வராங்க அப்படின்னு கொஞ்சம் கேட்டுட்டு அப்புறமா அவங்க முடிவெடுக்கலாம்.
இன்றைக்கு திருச்சபையிலே சிறுவர்கள் பங்களிப்பு மிக குறைவாக இருக்கிறதை நாம் அதிகமாக காண முடிகிறது. ஆனால் வருகின்ற நாட்களிலே இந்த சிறுவர் பணியானது மிக சிறப்பான முறையிலே நடைபெற வேண்டும். அது மாத்திரமல்ல, அவர்கள் எல்லா நிலையிலேயும் வழிபாடுகளிலேயும் பங்கேற்க வேண்டும். குறிப்பாக அவர்களுக்கு தங்களுடைய வாழ்வு உரிமைகளை குறித்தும் அவர்களுக்கு கற்றுக் கொடுக்க வேண்டும்.
And they have learnt about the child rights and various forms of child abuse. Children have said that their eyes were opened to the new realities. They have affirmed that they are often in a vulnerable situations. Having learnt about child rights, they express their confidence that these rights, if they are affirmed by the church and by the elders, children can be protected and they can grow in a safe environment. Children have said that church need to provide a safe space for them to grow, to express their views. I am confident that this workshop has paved way for the children to think differently. Once these principles are agreed by the World Council of Churches and thereby the member churches, and when they are adopted and implemented in respective churches, I believe that children will surely have a safe space and they would grow not only spiritually but also emotionally strong.
And now we are very happy to welcome young people, Matilda and Jonathan, who will share with us their views from Swedish perspective. Welcome.
It's important with youth participation, both for us and for the church. For the church to be carried forward by the next generation, it's important that we, in the present, feel that our participation is valued in parish and in church.
It is also important that we as young people can learn to take responsibility, that we can develop our leadership skills, and that we can be an active part of and participation of the service in church and share our views on worship. My path to becoming a young leader began at the end of my confirmation. I didn't want my time in church to end because it was a really fun part of my life and it felt like home to me. It was really fun because I loved the community and I loved all the adventures we went on. And church feels like a second home to me because no one judges you and everybody helps each other out. So when my priest asked me to be a young leader, I instantly said yes. And that's a decision I won't regret in a million years. So Matilda, how was your pathway to becoming a young leader?
At first, I was not interested in becoming a young leader in my church. My interest sparked when I had the opportunity to visit TESEA, the ecumenical community in France that has opened its doors to young people all around the world. The sense of belonging and the simplicity of the church services that we experienced there made me change my mind. Today, as a young leader in a confirmation group, my role is to be somebody that the youth can talk to and someone they can relate to, and also somebody who can organize games and activities for them. My role has also given me the chance to accompany confirmation groups in the pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, where we get to live in simplicity and have church services out in open fields. It's been a privilege to be on this journey together with other young people my age. Jonathan, could you tell us about your role as a young leader?
Yeah, I can tell you. I do pretty much the same thing as Matilda, and I agree. The journeys we have went to in other countries have been a great thing. The journey to TESEA has given me a greater understanding for other cultures, and now I have friends from all over the world. The journey to Santiago has given me a greater appreciation for simple things in life. Now, I have gotten the chance to work with unaccompanied refugee children. My mission, together with the local church, is to break down the walls between the refugees and local young people. We try to achieve this goal by having simple activities where we play football, dance together, have dinners, out hiking, and a lot more. And through these simple activities, we build a great foundation for a greater understanding of each other. This is really good because racism and xenophobia can be a problem in closed societies, and at present time, Swedish is no exception. Faith for me has always been a safety. It has been something I can turn to whenever I feel the need in my life. My time in church have made it stronger, so having the chance to spend more time in church and be a participant in regular Sunday services has made it much stronger. What's your view on faith, Matilda?
Faith is something that has come successively for me, and as a young leader, I've been able to reflect over the importance of faith together with other young people, and that is yet another example of the importance of youth participation in church.
And being a young leader has given us the chance to stand here in front of you and talk today. And with this, we want to say thank you for listening.
Matilda and Jonathan, we thank you for sharing your experiences with this plenary. Isn't it great to hear these ideas coming from youth? This is not just about future, it is our present. Thank you very much. There were so many amazing quotes that emerged from the consultations with children. So we would like you to feel the flavor of it. Between the testimonials, I will convey a sample of what children said to us. The first one is from Nigeria. The church should involve children in decision making and make church service very interesting for them. And now I would like to welcome Reverend Dr. Henriette, who will give an illustration of Principle 1. Principle 1 is about protection and what it can mean in practice. So let me invite Reverend Dr. Henriette Huta Barat-Levang from Toraja Church, Indonesia, an executive and central WCC member. Welcome.
Good morning, sisters and brothers in Christ. I bring you warm greetings from the Communion of Churches in Indonesia. And in a few minutes, I will share with you the responses of the churches in Indonesia to the escalating violence in the society. Just like in many places around the world, violence against children is rampant in Indonesian society. National Commission for Child Protection in Indonesia noted an increased cases of sexual violence against children in Indonesia every year. In 2000, for instance, there were 2,046 cases, and in 2013, the cases increased to 3,399. Inspired by the program of the Christian Conference of Asia on preserving the dignity of children and resisting trafficking, held in May 2012, the Communion of Churches in Indonesia committed to become child-friendly churches. A draft on concern for child protection was developed and confirmed by the Central Committee of the Communion of Churches in Indonesia in 2014. The statement underlined that just like all human beings, children are the image of God. Children have their own unique needs. They need to be protected so that they may grow to demonstrate their full potentiality. In the midst of many forms of violence against children, churches are called to becoming child-friendly churches. The Communion of Churches in Indonesia is committed to care for, protect, and respect all children, regardless of their social backgrounds. Actively involved in the ministry of accompanying, caring, and serving all children. Create a safety environment where children are given proper attention and protection to grow. Provide peace and just environment for children to build relationship and fully participate in the life of the churches, to meet God and others, and to grow in faith and understanding. Avoid and reduce all bad influences and various forms of child exploitation. Respect the privacy of children. Avoid the exploitation, stigmatization, discrimination, exposed especially through media. Create and strengthen the network of solidarity and sharing in promoting the rights and protection of children. How do the churches moving ahead together? Since 2014 until now, some members churches of the Communion of Churches in Indonesia have engaged in introducing the concern in order to build the awareness of the churches and encourage them to develop their own policies on becoming child-friendly churches. through various programs and activities. Among others, empowering the parents for lovely parenting, encouraging and equipping the Sunday school teachers with skills to engage with children, involving the children in the service of the church. Further, Communion of Churches in Indonesia continues to engage in advocacies for various forms of violence against children in the community. Friends, those are some of the things that have been done by the churches in Indonesia, and we continuously to promote to the churches about the child protection policy and how the church is becoming the child-friendly churches. A lot of activities going on, including children's choir, and the policy was developed based on the analysis of the situation of children in Indonesia, the cries and the wounds and the pain of the children in Indonesia with theological reflection, and come to the ecumenical call imperative to become child-friendly churches. So there are 7 points in that policy, which include, I think I'll just put on the screen. This is one occasion when the churches in Indonesia show their solidarity in welcoming the strangers, the Rohingya, in the northern part of Sumatra. This is one of the activities in the team of Timor Church in collaboration with UNICEF and World Council of Churches on the participation of children. And this policy is accompanied by the guidelines for nurturing and protecting children in the family, church, and society. Actually, the Indonesian government have issued a national regulation for child protection. And in that regards, the churches are even working closely with the government, with the NGOs, and people of different faiths to promote the protection of children in the different places, so that the churches can participate actively in this movement, in this journey for freedom, for peace and justice for the children, and celebrate the gifts of the children. Children are not only the church of tomorrow, but also the church of today.
Thank you, Henriette. Thank you very much for your important and also inspirational input. Children in Indonesia, in Bali, during the consultation said, when the principles will be enforced, families will know they have a responsibilities to protect children. Another aspect of Principle 1 is a church's role in promoting birth registration. Now, I would like to welcome Bishop Arnold C. Temple from Methodist Church, Sierra Leone, who will share with us his experience in this area. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Madam Moderator and friends, quite recently we had a consultation in Addis Ababa. It was really a workshop on statelessness. it took on board a concern for the problem of statelessness, particularly among the children, the millions of children in the world with no form of identification, no identity. And in that workshop, we recognize the right of the child to belong, the right of the child to be identified with a nation of the world. And we see it as a challenge that, particularly in some of the countries in Africa, it's so difficult to have that form of registration. And so a good number of the children, good number of even adults are stateless. In that workshop, I shared an experience, and I thought it was just a simple experience. I never knew it would be that attractive to the point at which I'm being asked to share it again with the Central Committee. It has to do with birth registration in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone has been involved in registration of birth since the very early 1800s because of the early civil service establishment in the Sierra Leone situation. But in spite of that, there had been great challenge with registration in the interior of the country. It was a great challenge indeed. It remains a great challenge. But the church has made a vital contribution. Not that the church set out to help the government in civil registration, no, but that every baptism was recorded in the church's registrar and certificates issued. Children were baptized at age 3 months, and certificates were issued. In time, these certificates became registration documents, particularly when in the absence of a civil registration certificate. The Birth and Death Department, which is part of the Ministry of Health, does a lot in terms of registration. But as I said earlier on, it becomes difficult when you're born in a village in the interior of the country. But the church is a grassroots movement with membership as far afield as the remotest villages in the country. As such, at baptism at 3 months, the certificates were issued, and these certificates became effective documents in the absence of a birth certificate. That's a contribution of the church because it is the right of every child to be registered and be identified with a nation. There is another aspect of the church's contribution which I shared then, and that has to do with the role of traditional birth attendants. Usually, traditional birth attendants would help in villages where there are no hospitals, no clinics. But they were always in hiding. They were not allowed to come to the fore with their activity. And the church in Sierra Leone encouraged the traditional birth attendants to come forward and do what they do. We did that with the creation of ceremonies where birth attendants would come and would be giving a shield and financial incentive at the birth of 1,000 child. That when a birth attendant delivered the 1,000th child, it was celebrated by the church, and as such, they were encouraged to come to the fore, and the registration of the child became part of that exercise. We believe strongly that it is a vital right of a child to be registered, to be identified with a nation, so that that child would receive all the benefits of being a national. That's what I'm asked to share. And I'm asked to share it within the limited time of 6 minutes. And since I am somebody who is always obedient, I take the instructions of Comrade Masimba.
Thank you very much, Bishop Temple, for your experience and important message for all of us. In South Africa, during the consultation, a 9-year-old child said, "People should write to all the governments and tell them how important it is that all babies get a birth certificate." The third principle promotes climate justice. Please let me to welcome Reverend Jenny Norden from Church of Sweden, a member of core group for the development of principles for child-friendly churches. Reverend Jenny, please, could you share your experiences in these areas? Thank you.
All this is my home. These fjords, rivers, lakes, the cold, the light, the harsh conditions, the night and the sun of the open spaces, the sorrow and joy, brothers and sisters. All this is my home, and I carry it in my heart. This is a poem by the Sami author Nils Aslak Valkeapää. He speaks of his experience of being indigenous, but I think it can also speak to us today what it means to be a pilgrim, and also what it means to fight for climate justice. Since climate changes crosses all borders, it hits hard both on humans and on environment and animals. So, in seeking climate justice, we must address, prevent, and respond to climate changes, because they will also create harsh conditions for the present children and youth in their future and for generations to come. So we are called by God to be stewards and to have a mutually shared responsibility to seek to eliminate unjust use and distribution of resources. When Matilda and Jonathan will go on a pilgrimage next year, they will do awareness raising and they will do changes in their lifestyle to try to seek climate justice. But apart from the youth, Church of Sweden also works with children from a young age in a concept called pilgrimage children. They all get their own backpack with simple equipment such as a water bottle and something to put their bum on when they sit down. But working with children as pilgrims is about acknowledging children in the church. It is about responding to and equipping them in listening about what are their theological and existential questions as well as answers. And so, with the pilgrimage of children, they both journey in urban or city environments as well as in countryside. And the children learn about and share thoughts on Christian faith and life, including climate and justice. So that is also a way where the Christian education and faith is being combined with being a part of society and church. And in Church of Sweden, the Diocese of Uppsala, the Church of Sweden Youth, and local parishes are the lead in this. In Church of Sweden canon law, it says, in the Christian faith, the children has a particular position and thus needs to be acknowledged in the programs of Church of Sweden. So a way to put theology and canon law into practice was a decision in 2012 in the Church of Sweden General Synod when it was decided to develop child consequence analysis, i.e. organizational child impact assessment. It meant that guiding principles, manual and trainings were developed addressing why and how to do the child consequence analysis as a part of the decision-making process and to follow up both in parish, diocese, and national level. And so finally, I would just like to share with you something I noticed yesterday when I arrived. I noticed two of the stewards, Ingrid and Julia, who were opening and closing the doors at the end of this room as people were passing through. And at one point, I also saw Ingrid when she did the thumbs up to one of the participants in acknowledging the way he opened and closed the door and thus also assisting her. And I reflected upon seeing this, that it could be an image of how children and youth open doors for us as adults, where we get a peek of their faith, their views on theological issues, what it means to be a church, and what it means to be young today. But also the importance of us to have closed doors in the meaning that we create safe space for children and youth in the church also. And let me be a little bit blunt. I believe that apart from God judging us, I think that the ones who comes in assessing if we are walking together in a pilgrimage of justice and peace, that is the children and youth. If we walk together in and beyond a pilgrimage for justice and peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Jenny, for your speech. You mentioned very important things connected with the third principle and many other important ideas. Thank you very much. Another powerful message from children consulted in Bali is: include how to protect our planet in Sunday school curricula. This will help children understand that our responsibility towards the environment has a direct connection to faith. Originally, we were planning for refugee children to speak with us in this plenary and illustrate the principle 1 about protection. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible. So we have therefore asked for one member churches to share a testimonial with us and show us what does it mean in practice. So before we turn to the question and answers, I would like to invite Bishop Petra Bosse-Huber to share.
KD have not become tired of helping, may it be in parishes, shelters, or schools. Increased lobby and advocacy work and increased budgets reflect this commitment for refugees on the greater institutional level of our church. In our work, we pay particular attention to refugees with special needs and high vulnerability, such as families, mothers traveling alone with their children, or unaccompanied minors. Many of our institutions of diaconia are currently hosting child refugees, offer therapies for traumatized children, and ensure their education. All evangelical schools and kindergartens are willing to receive child refugees, and many do, mostly on their own initiative and at their own expenses, as public authorities are covering only a part of the basic costs. As great as the efforts are, and also the efforts by many, many other denominations and actors of civil society in Germany, the children's rights in Germany are far from being fully respected, protected, and fulfilled. Still, the fate of over 8,500 child refugees registered in Germany is really unknown. These children are officially missing. Many might have left Germany and are living now with family elsewhere without having become victims of violence, trafficking, or sexual abuse. Nevertheless, these risks are really high, as UNICEF continuously points out. Also, the mere fact that German and European authorities fail to keep track of thousands of unaccompanied children who have been officially registered already is unacceptable and most worrying. In general, German law and EU regulations guarantee equal rights for child refugees. Yet child refugees still do not fully enjoy the same rights as other children in Germany. They do not receive the appropriate protection and peace to cope with loss and trauma. They do not receive the needed access to education and assistance to enjoy equal opportunities and therefore a fair chance for their future, as UNICEF documented oftentimes. In our advocacy work as churches, we demand from federal and state government the fulfillment of guaranteed rights and try to prevent further legal rollbacks. We demand procedures and a childcare that is in accordance to the UN Convention of the Rights of Child, the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, and the standards in German laws. All guaranteed rights and provisions have to be fulfilled equally for all children in Germany. The handling of the child refugees in our country is therefore also a touchstone for the general implementation of children's rights in Germany. And it will remain a matter that is near to all Christians' hearts and a main task for our churches there. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Petra, for sharing with us this important message and information. Thank you. And now I think we have 10 minutes for questions and answers, so you can ask our expert speakers for the details and for clarification. So floor is open for your question. So somebody is already waiting at a microphone 1. Cora, please.
Quiero agradecer a...
Wait just a moment for...
Okay.
for I think we all are.
Ok, gracias. Bueno, quiero agradecer a cada uno de los ponentes porque han tocado el tema más vulnerable en la iglesia. Considero que desde mi experiencia personal, preguntarles frente a todos los desafíos que ha dicho, por ejemplo, Enriqueta, la primera, que habló de los billones de niños en el mundo y que cada uno de ellos sufren violencia. Y la experiencia del film de la obispa en Indonesia y la experiencia de la juventud. En base a todas esas experiencias que se presenta para la niñez, considero de que eso es una realidad también en nuestros países de América Latina, sobre todo los niños y niñas indígenas del sector de donde yo vengo y de nuestros otros hermanos países, Sur y Mesoamérica también. ¿Cómo podemos articular las iglesias, miembros del CMI, un poco más visible para ver quizás de aquí 10 años que en América Latina, los sectores indígenas, los otros sectores, podemos ver una transformación en los niños que sufren y sufren mucho. Desde mi experiencia como madre, como pastora, quiero preguntarles también, ¿cómo se puede acercar con las iglesias miembros de apoyar a las mujeres que somos lideresas? Entramos en la iglesia como pastora, somos pastora de mucha gente, de muchos miembros, pero en nuestra casa, a veces, por ejemplo, mi niña me dice, tú eres luz de afuera, pero en tu casa nunca estás para atender.
Thank you for your question. We will collect a question and afterwards we will answer them, okay? So, microphone number 2.
Thank you very much. I also speak as an indigenous person. I would like to amplify what Reverend Matamoros said. To drive the point further, let us not forget the children in indigenous communities whose parents are at the forefront in the fight and defense of the integrity and stewardship of creation. We have so many cases of children of indigenous communities watching as their parents are killed by state forces, the security forces of those companies and firms that are out to destroy our forests. We have cases of children watching helplessly as the state security forces occupy their schools. And we have so many cases of indigenous children who are part of the internally displaced people. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, microphone number 3.
Thank you very much, moderator. I think, let me summarize first. The rights of the children violated today in Zimbabwe. Every day 100 children died because there is lack of the right of health. There is not food. There is not, of course, also accommodation and education. We have to remember Christ. As a baby, no place for him, for his birth, only in the place of the animals. They wanted to kill him. He became immigrant, refugee, homeless. They killed thousands of children because they want to kill. We have to think the powers who wanted to kill Christ as a baby. Herod. So today, we have to come out and to speak in truth how to protect the rights of the children. Why the children dying in Syria? Why the children dying in Zimbabwe? So, first of all, it's an opportunity to emphasize the important role of the WCC and of the National Council of Churches to protect human rights and the children after the sufferings of the two world wars. Unfortunately, the European Christians were involved in the past through the apartheid in South Africa, through the colonial rule. And colonial rule and poverty are related today. Latin America, Asia, Africa. So what the Bishop Temple proposed for the role of the local churches to speak to their governments is very important. $200 billion out of the $300 billion they spent for humanitarian emergencies. During the meeting of the World Humanitarian Summit, the Secretary General represented all of us there. They are spent for NGOs and the people who are involved to protect people suffering of conflicts, and 50% of them are children. In this country, for example, and we are grateful for their involvement to help humanitarian issues, but it's an example, it's not attack to Norway, it's attack to the rich countries. For example, when they say we give to protect the children money, they mean to support, for example, NGOs to buy planes, helicopters, in order to be involved in humanitarian emergencies. So what is going to the children? So the role of the WCC is very important to protect the rights of the children.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we will give answers for this first round. So the first question was to Reverend Dr. Henriette.
Thank you for the response. In Indonesia, in the midst of the pluralistic society, even though the churches have been working in the different places, as you know, the churches in Indonesia are mostly related to the different tribes. And in the midst of the conflicts, like in Poso or in Papua or in Aceh, except Aceh, of course, because majority are Muslim there, the churches try their best. Yet, we realize that we cannot work together. We have to work with people of goodwill, whether it is a local community or people of different faith, to promote the rights of the children, the protection of the children. And that's what we are trying to do. For instance, children with HIV/AIDS, children in the refugees camp, or in internally displaced people due to the various conflict in the society. We cannot do it alone, but work together with the different communities in the society.
Thank you, Henriette, for your answer. And the third question will be answered by Ms. Sabine Rakoto Malala. So thank you.
Thank you. Maybe just a quick answer also on the first question. I think the role of fathers and of men is very important for strengthening women. And I think, especially in violence against children, more and more we see involving men and involving fathers in the child-rearing practices has a huge impact on giving different spaces to women. In terms of the emergencies, the two questions that came up relating to emergencies and humanitarian aid, UNICEF with the peacekeeping operations runs a mechanism which is called the monitoring and reporting mechanisms. And we do try, I say we, I mean Katrina could be presenting about it more, but we try to hold governments accountable for reporting on grave violations, which includes rape, torture, killing of children. There's 6 grave violations. So there are accountability mechanisms, and it's not about naming and shaming, but it's about working with governments to say what you're doing is not right, and it will be discussed at Security Council level. So we do hope to address those. It takes many years, as you can imagine. And then in terms of I very much agree with the point made by the third speaker on making the link between development and emergencies. We have to stop throwing bags and buckets of money to emergencies and to NGOs doing the work, but try to think more about long-term and building sustainable solutions, and through churches is definitely one of them. And we hope that the Global Partnership will help to build those bridges between development and emergencies.
Thank you very much. So I'm afraid we are almost running out of time, but would you like to continue in asking any questions? Okay, so 2 more questions. Okay, so I will ask microphone number 1.
Thank you. Theodora Isa from Syrian Orthodox Patriarchate. I have already expressed my opinion through on Twitter account, so the youth can really read what I am saying. I'm thankful for every one of you telling us about the efforts that are being done and working with the children. And I'm thankful for Bishop Huber from Germany telling us about what they are doing with the refugees. But I was really stunned to see that the children of Syria and Iraq haven't been represented in any way or form. Rev Martina said that we are unable to bring refugees. I understand that, but it would have been a very good thing to ask the churches from the distracted areas or whatever has been left there to talk a little bit about what's going on. I will just give a taste, what I've heard last night. I know about it, but it was repeated last night in the women plenary, that girls at the age of 10 or maybe less are being forced to marry the prince of ISIL, okay? The prince of Daesh. And then if the prince is sick and tired of this girl, he would divorce her, and then she will be taken into prostitution, given as gifts for the soldiers of ISIL. This is sad. Children have already lost their innocence and their childhood in Syria and Iraq. They have been uprooted from their homeland, and they are now living on donations. Those were the people who have properties, who have lives, who have their churches. Churches have been distracted, so where would they go? Churches have been taken and become the headquarters of ISIL. I can talk about cathedral, our cathedral in Mosul. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. So microphone number 2.
Eustathius Mataroham, again from the Syrian Orthodox Church of Antioch. I would like to thank all of you. There is something that drew to my attention, the priest from Sweden. The church is interested in putting in the curriculum of the Sunday school something about environment, caring of the climate, that is for the level of the children. Actually, it's not that enough, because you brought to my mind something happened within my family in Sweden. I have a sister who is married there to our orthopedic surgeon. She has the twin girls, Anthony and Simon. They are now about 7. One day they came back home, and they were beaten by some friends in the school. So they were very sad. The older brother in the family told them, tomorrow you go together and you beat that child who beated Anthony. And then Anthony went back. Anthony was strong, and he beat the child in the school. And he came back and said to Lukian, his older brother, never tell me to go and do this again. So this what is really, we need to teach, I see that, our children, what are their rights when there is a violence, how to solve their problems. It's not to take an advice from another brother to go and revenge, but we need to teach them, whether in the Sunday school curriculum or in the government curriculum. It is very important all over the world to tell the child what are his rights, how he can defend himself when there is a violence. And I think that this is a recommendation that the World Council of Churches can take it to churches and then to other governments. Thank you.
Thank you. And microphone number 3. It'll be maybe the last question, but it's not the last question of this day, because we would like to invite you to continue asking also during the break and the lunch. So it's not the last question today. I'm so sorry. So last question, please.
My name is Klaas van der Kamp. I'm from the Netherlands. My question is to the church members here. If theology itself is part of the reflection, because sometimes theology is part of the problem. We're running a very program in the Netherlands, very intensive program for child friendliness, and we face a misuse of Bible texts like honor your father and your mother, or a father who loves his child will hit him or her. And we see that some churches who are have a closed ecclesiological view are not open, also not open to these questions. And the most problems we have in these churches who say we do not have any problems with having a safe climate for the children.
Thank you very much. So our quick answers, maybe I would like to ask you, Katarina, to answer.
I would like to say something about the first intervention. First of all, thank you very much for reminding us about the situation of children in Syria. Of course, it's a terrible situation. There are no words to describe it. And as we were thinking to address, to have a child refugee here, we were more thinking about the response of receiving countries, to underline what positive is happening there, because a lot is happening. Churches are doing a lot in European countries, but by no means we meant to not talk and not address the suffering of children and adolescents in emergency situations all over the world. I would like just to remind that among the principles for child-friendly churches, there is also a principle looking at what churches can do, the role that churches can play in emergency context. We know that in a lot of emergency situations, whether it's a man-made emergency, whether it's a conflict, or whether sometimes it can be natural disasters, whatever the emergency is, churches and faith communities are very often the first responders, because they are already there. Before all the NGOs, all the UN and everybody comes in, churches are already there. And not only that, they will stay even after the international community will leave, when the next emergency became more fancy and more, on the first headlines in the newspapers. So again, the church communities have a key role to play in supporting communities in emergency situations. And the angle we are looking at it, we are trying to look at from now is that of children, and how to especially pay particular attention to how to protect children in those situations. So how to make sure that whatever programs the churches run, whether it is a feeding program or reconstruction or health, very often let's not forget the role in primary health support, whatever they do, that it has a specific focus on children and pays particular attention to the protection of children in those conflicts. Because as you rightly reminded us, when there is a situation of crisis, children are those who are the most vulnerable, and so they are particularly at risk. They become exposed to any kind of exploitation and abuse and violence and trafficking and recruitment from forces, armed forces and all that. So churches can really do a lot for them in those contexts. So thank you very much for reminding us about that.
I would like to ask Henriette for our last words at the question and answer session.
Yes, as we engage with promoting the dignity of children, I think as churches we have to look into our theological understanding as well about children. How do we treat children in our family and in our lives. Some in the culture where I come from, sometimes the words that, how do you call that? If to respect the parents, sometimes being used actually to say to children, stop, don't say anything. And I think that is making the children feel very repressive and lost their sense of confidence to say what they feel, what they think. So I think as churches, it's a call also for us to look into our theological understanding, how we welcome children in our midst.
Thank you all very much. Let's finish our question and answers with a prayer together. God, our eternal parent, we thank you for the gift and inspiration for children. Give us also the gifts and inspiration of wisdom and love, so that we may enjoy them for the immeasurable joy they bring us. Nourish them in all that is good and beautiful and true. Protect them from all forms of oppression and abuse. Affirm them with grace and love, and learn from them the virtues of life that we enjoy. Through him who hold us to acquire the spirit of a child, even Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay, and before we invite General Secretary for announcement, I just have a note, So our last words belong to Masimba, who will end our plenary. So I would like to invite Masimba. I will help him to get to the mic.
Good morning once again. We've heard the presentations and we've heard the questions. At 12, Jesus sneaked away from his parents and went to a temple to discuss issues to do with faith. And at 30, he began his ministry. Imagine your children sneaking away from you and running to church. The journey for the principles and tools for child-friendly churches is only the beginning of that. As parents, as grandparents, you would be more happier to have your children missing and being found in church than in any other place, for it is colder outside the church. We therefore call on you as members, as we go back to our homes, be it Colombo, be it Volgograd, be it Freetown, be it Johannesburg, to start thinking about how we can make churches more child-friendly. The document is still work in progress, and any comments for your improvement, any comments for the document's improvement are very welcome. There are emails hopefully displayed where you can send your feedback. But as real young children, we've also done a graffiti wall outside where we're asking you to go and write a pledge for the child. So as you take time out of your busy schedules, please write on the wall and please make pledges. We're still open to suggestions and improvements to the document. And with that, may I therefore ask, and I know he wasn't aware of this, the General Secretary to dance to the drums as he comes to make his announcements.
Okay. My thanks also to these presentations, and also not only food for thoughts, but also for our feet to be moving, dancing, but also continue to walk and to address these issues together. The plenary after this will deal with public issues, and the plenary after lunch will deal with particularly the report from the Policy Reference Committee. Let us have a break together, and let us see how we can learn more from our children to dance and to celebrate life together. Thank you.